Okay, welcome. We are live. So today on the program, I have with me Cheryl Marzec from Sumi Nungwa, and it's a special foundation that builds bridges between white people and Indian people. And I did a documentary 20 years ago, and I found that there definitely needs to be more bridges between Native Americans and white people. So, Cheryl, thank you so much for being on the program.
Thank you for having me, Rich.
Yeah, I'm really fascinated by this topic especially because I really got to know the Indian reservation. It was the Uinta Ore reservation in early 2000s. And what I learned from being there is that the mortality rate of young people is the highest in the state of Utah. The dropout rate is the highest in the state of Utah. The poverty rate is the highest. I mean, and if you look at all the reservations, they're all pretty similar.
They are.
It's just really bad statistics. Really, really disappointing to see that that people are just not flourishing on these reservations. And I know many of them didn't want to be there in the first place. But why would you say that this is happening, and what can be done about it?
Well, that's a big question, Rich.
Yeah, that's a very big question.
Yeah. I don't know that I have a lot of good answers for that myself. I understand what you're saying about the poverty rate, housing, and housing can be absolutely appalling. I hate to even think about what some of our elders live in. It really goes back, I think, to the poverty, the fact that the reservations are so remote from everything else and from various kind of facilities. The majority of jobs on the Hopi and the Navajo reservation are government jobs. Opening up a business is a hard thing to do. You have to get a business license. That can certainly be difficult, especially if you are a white guy. You know, Belegane if you're Navajo, or Pahani if you're Hopi. If you're Native, it's easier, but you've got to have the capital to fund it. You've got to have the business acumen. And to get that kind of education, you have to go off the reservation. One of the things that happens when you leave the reservation is that you leave your culture. And if you are a traditional Navajo or Hopi individual, you can be really lost. Now, we do have a few things, like in Salt Lake, we have the Urban Indian Center, which does help to bring these people together, but we need a lot more. They need a lot more on the reservations. Programs to help the people more.
And it seems like in our Anglo-Saxon Protestant mindset, it's just hard to wrap our heads around their issues because the culture is so different.
Yeah.
I mean, I think you don't understand that unless you spend some time on the reservation, that they literally think in a completely different way than we do, and the way that they think is not in a material way. It's not like, I want to build a giant mansion and become rich. That's just not a mindset that most of them have. What do most of them aspire to have in their lives?
That is a good question. They aspire to survive. They aspire to have enough to eat. They aspire to, being able to find a job, which can be difficult.
And it seems like they think more short term, maybe? Is that accurate?
And I think that part of that goes to the poverty. And, we're kind of focusing on a negative end there, but the other place I'd really like to bring in is the richness of the culture.
Yeah.
And
what they have what we really have to learn from them.
Having sat in Navajo hogans and been to traditional funerals and different things, it is a totally different mindset than what we have. It is so closely tied to the land. If for the Navajo, my Navajo sister, her umbilical cord was buried on the reservation, and where I couldn't tell you, and she won't tell me, but that ties her. It ties her to the land. It's like cement, and you just can't go off and leave that without having a major impact on your life, and suddenly the different ceremonies that you would be attending, the things that you would do, the nightway ceremonies and different things, you don't have those. They don't exist. A Hopi, you don't have a kiva to go do your kiva work, to be a part of the society that you might belong to.
So it's like you're sort of damned if you don't go get a degree and get educated, but you're also damned if you do, because it's such a cultural shock. Yeah. And so you mentioned that when settlers first came through, maybe going all the way back to Dominguez and Escalante, they didn't think that they had any religion.
Yes.
And tell me what you've learned about that.
Religion for us, it feels like it's kind of stuck on. You go to church on Sunday, you might have a few meetings that you do and activities during the week. For the Native people, it's just imbued in everything that they do. The way they speak, the way they look at things. The money does not have the same kind of importance to them that we do have in our culture. So it's just a totally different way of looking at it.
Yeah, and I look at the pottery and the jewelry that they're producing in the Navajo Nation and on the Hopi Reservation. If we can show some of that, and it's just like the most incredible stuff. It takes so much skill to produce stuff like this. I've tried pottery. It's incredibly difficult to make. And this is a good friend of yours. Can you tell us about him?
This is D. Satella, and he is a traditional Hopi potter. He is a master Hopi potter. And this is him sitting with one of his, three of his pieces on the front door, by the kitchen door of the house. Have we got some of the other ones there that he did? Yeah, this was taken at the Santa Fe Indian Art Market last year. These are some of the other examples of things that he does.
See if I can point this.
And one of the things that people comment to me when I'm at the market or with Dee is, how do they make these so precise? Do they use a wheel or something? And no, these are all hand-built. The clay is dug on the reservation. Dee processes all the clay himself. He molds them, coil method. All of the sanding, the smoothing, the designs, the painting, and finally you get to firing it. And after all that work, that big plate that was up a minute ago is a 22-inch diameter plate. Wow. And when they do a ground firing with sheep dung, and you don't know until you open up that ground kiln what you've got.
So they do the firing underground with sheep dung?
It's above ground, but when you uncover the kiln, it's above ground, but when you start removing the sheets of tin and things and scraping the coals away, then you find out finally, was the temperature not right and did it go gray? Or did it crack in the process? Or have you got paint that flaked off? You may have a totally ruined piece.
So it's not at all done in using modern kilns or modern techniques.
No, not at all.
It's completely the old traditional way of doing it.
Old traditional way. And
I just think that is the coolest stuff. Yeah. I just think it's incredible that there's people still doing that and preserving that tradition.
And if you look at a piece of pottery You can tell if it is ground fired traditionally versus fired in a kiln, because in the ground firing, you get what they call clouds or blush spots that come out where the fire was just a little different temperature. Maybe there was a little bit of breeze that got through there or something. And so you'll get these clouds. You do not get those if you fired them in a kiln the way most of we white folks would do it.
Wow. And so explain how you got all connected with the Hopi and Navajo. You said you have your sister who's living on the res and your husband is Hopi. Can you explain all that?
One thing you find when you spend much time on the reservations and with the people, when you can cross that barrier of being a Beligana at Hopi or a Beligana at Navajo or Pahana at Hopi, you find a lot of acceptance and it becomes a rich culture and they just fold you in. My husband Robert was adopted by Pauline and Justin Satilla about, might have been 20 years ago, maybe a little bit less, because they felt like he should belong to the family. And so I am Mayway Robert, which means Robert's wife. I'm the in-law. Robert has his responsibilities when they're there, and I have all my responsibilities when I'm there. I am a part of the culture. On the Navajo side of it, there isn't a formal ceremony, a hair washing like there is at Hopi, but just the same, I feel like I have just been absorbed into, several of the families that are there. So I have sisters, I have some uncles, my grandkids, my great-grandkids, and I am as much a part of their lives as whether they or not they were blood relatives of mine.
And that's got not probably not very common, right? That they adopt how old was your husband when he was adopted?
Oh, yes. So he would have been like in his 50s when he was adopted.
And was it because he was just going down there and you were both going down there spending so much time and you really got to know?
And we became very, very attached to the Satilla family. They supported us. They supported Sumi Nungwa, our nonprofit. In fact, Mom, before she died, said that we should always have use of the house and the land because she felt that what we were doing, bringing necessities to the elders was so important. And the same thing for Winnie, one of my Navajo sisters, and probably one of the people I'm closest to down there, her and my daughter Barbara. We host a big lunch for all of our Navajo elders that we help at their home and distribute all the boxes and everything. Sumi Nungwa is a very personal organization because we go to all of our elders' houses. We know where they live. We know their children. We know their grandchildren. We know their neighbors. And it's a very intimate relationship that we have. I mean, I've been stopped in the grocery store more than once when somebody came up to me and said, I saw your big silver van and I knew you were down here and I came in to find you and say hi.
So how did that all start? Like just you getting interested in the reservations and going down there to help them? Is that it? Or
I've worked with, Adopt a Native Elder is another big organization, far bigger than ours, that was started a number of years ago before ours. And I'd worked with Adopt a Native Elder, and I still work with Adopt a Native Elder. They are a fabulous organization. But there was this gulf. They did not work with the Hopi. They worked only with Navajo. So we actually work back and forth. When they have someone at Hopi that they think needs assistance, they'll get hold of us.
Looks like we got a question from one of our viewers.
Do the Hopi and Navajo still do the feather-worked shawls made with turkey feathers?
The pahos and things, yes, they do. And they are still an important part of their culture and their ceremonies.
And I know that the Hopi and Navajo have a completely different culture than like the Ute Indians and the Paiutes and the Shoshone.
Well, and the Hopi and the Navajo are completely different cultures from one another, even though the Hopi reservation is like the donut hole in the middle of the Navajo reservation.
Mm-hmm. And they're so completely different, too.
They are.
It's like, when I've looked into it, it's like trying to compare Chinese people to Polynesians. It's like there's no it's so different, and the nations that existed here before we came were so completely different, and so pre-Puebloan people and the offshoots from the Aztec Empire it's believed that the Puebloan culture came as an offshoot from the Aztec Empire. Is that correct?
Yeah. As you look at it from an anthropological point of view, you can trace their roots of coming from the south up into the area where they are now. Some of my Navajo people are not. Their roots are that they came from, they arose from the earth, from the various worlds to this world. Mm-hmm. If I talk to an anthropologist, they're going to talk about how they came across the land bridge. Mm-hmm. They're an Athabascan culture, and they didn't come into this part of the country until like the mid-1500s or so. Well, there are timbers in one of the old kivas at Hopi in the village of Old Arribe that dated back to the 1100s.
Yeah, I think that now, I know that archaeologists and anthropologists like to hold on to that pre-Clovis mindset, but I think it's pretty much disappeared. That's what happened. They were here long before that.
They were.
Yeah, and so what do you think is the most important piece of their culture that we could learn from them, that we could adopt in our modern world and really, grasp a hold of and learn, how to live better?
Mm-hmm. I would say living in the present, living in the now, what's going on now, without the focus so much on the economics of things. If you have what you need to build your hogan at Navajo, which is very important because ceremonies are held in the hogan, typically. And if you don't have that, that's a problem. At Hopi, they have the kivas. Every village has a number of kivas. A lot of the ceremonies and things take place in the kivas, where I've never been into a kiva. I've been invited, but I've never felt comfortable entering into it. So,
what happens in a kiva?
They have a lot of ceremonies that everybody in a village, you are associated with a particular kiva. Some of my family that are from originally from Walpi, there are like 7 kivas, and you have your kiva, and that's where you go, and the people from within the different societies will perform whatever ceremonies they're going to perform down there. You will be participating.
Mm-hmm. So dancing, singing.
Yeah, dancing, singing. And you'll also, they do a lot of dances which are actually open to the public, more or less, as long as you're behaving properly. Yeah. And you will see the various dancers at different times of the year. They will do what they need to do in the kiva, come out to the plazas and dance, and then back in the kivas for more ceremony and things that they need to perform there. So it really works back and forth. Mm-hmm. But we're only privileged to see what happens when they're out of the kivas, if we're permitted to be there.
Yeah. The dancing is pretty remarkable. I've been to a few powwows, and it's pretty amazing what they do.
Yeah, it is. And powwow is totally different than what you find with Hopi dances or with the Navajo ceremonies. Powwow is a whole different category because that's is kind of an amalgamation across all tribes.
Mm-hmm.
And, if we're talking about Hopi dances at the villages in the plaza, those are specific to that village and that particular time in their calendar, in their annual calendar.
Yeah.
So
And I kind of hate to go back to the negative part, but I recently read a book that I thought was probably the best book I've read about Native Americans, which was just the Comanche. I mean, that focused on that tribe, but it kind of spills over to all the other tribes. Big fat book, but I loved it because but what the author contends is that the Native Americans, their whole culture was really taken from them. And a lot of them do not have any culture. They don't even know their sacred dances anymore. A lot of them are doing the dances wrong, or have adopted other Native Americans' dances because they don't know what they are. They've lost their songs. A lot of them have lost their language, and it's kind of been amalgamated, like you said, and that they're sort of grasping for a culture that produces meaning and value to them. And it's obviously not white culture, but what is the solution to helping them thrive again? Because I interviewed a Native American woman about a year and a half ago. She came to Salt Lake City, and she said she came to get on the list to get an apartment, to get free housing. And she said she was doing it for her children. And she wanted to try to raise her children in, I suppose, a more healthy environment. But do you know what could be done to help them, I guess, become a flourishing culture again?
Well, there's kind of a contradiction built into that, because they want to maintain their culture, and they work to bring back a lot of the things that they've lost. Some of them they can't bring back because they are totally lost. But on the other hand, if a culture is not changing, a culture dies. Mm-hmm. So there's a fine line here. I think if there were more industry, that would help. But it's also very remote. If you look at the Hopi and the Navajo reservations, you've got an hour, 2 hours, or more to get to one of the border towns where you can find, your Walmarts and the different kinds of things, your Safeways, and
it is this huge expanse of land, the Four Corners region, and it's a massive amount of territory, but it's kind of, I mean, I gotta say, it's just sad to go through there because it's so many people living in abject poverty, and unlike your friend Dee, who is making this amazing pottery, it just seems like they don't have this will to work, because at least my experience on the Ute Indian reservation was they were getting what they needed at a subsistence level, and that was good enough. So why work in the white man's world?
Yeah, and the Utes are in a little different situation because they do have money that comes into them. Mm-hmm. The Hopi tribe, the Navajo tribe, they do not provide money. There isn't like a monthly stipend or anything that comes from the tribe to help support these people. So they are in a different situation.
Yeah.
They are definitely very low income, but I don't know that there's a real good solution to it. Trying to figure out how to bring.
They've got to obviously figure out the solution on their own. We can't figure out.
And I think education, but you've got to do it in a manner that is acceptable to the Native people and acceptable to their culture.
Yeah.
So I can't come in to their culture and just start teaching them how to do all of these things. I have to work very closely with somebody to help figure out what their path should be and how I can help them improve their circumstance but still maintain their culture, maintain their identity, not move into my culture.
Yeah.
And
yeah, they're straddling two worlds, the white world and the Indian world, and it's extremely difficult.
Yeah.
But I think it's awesome what you guys are doing.
Yeah.
It's really cool.
I feel like I straddle three worlds because I have the white culture and I have the Hopi culture and the Navajo culture, and they are three very different worlds.
Yeah. Well, thanks for coming on, Cheryl. Really appreciate it. Good talking to you. Oh, one more question.
Let's see. Years ago, amazed to know that kneeling down bread is what we Mexicans call tamales. Do they nixtamalize the corn either with wood ash or calcium hydroxide or limestone?
I better repeat that question because I don't know if we'll hear it on YouTube. So they're asking about tamales, if tamales were actually a Native American food. Did you know that before they became called tamales?
Well, when the person asking the question talks about kneel-down bread.
Kneel-down bread.
Kneel-down bread in Navajo or Hopi is completely different from a tamale.
Oh, okay. It's nothing like this, the tamale.
No. They do tamales, but they do them in a, sort of a Mexican way of doing tamales. But then they have their own ways that they do it, that they work with the corn. The white name for mamadals. Mamadals in Hopi are a blue corn that they mix, a blue corn mush. Sometimes they will add some raisins to it, and then they tie it into a husk. This does not have any kind of meat or any filling in the middle. It's just a little... It looks like the Hopi hair buns, if you've seen those, the big butterfly hairdos.
Raisins and corn mashed together and made into
blue corn. That
corn.
is a blue corn. Every corn has a different use. Every color of corn has a different purpose.
Wow.
And so
interesting.
Yeah, if you grow sweet corn, that they will cook in a huge pit overnight, and everybody enjoys the sweet corn. If you're doing, say, a pikami, which is kind of a pudding that the Hopi use at ceremonies, that's a white corn that you use for that.
Huh.
If you're making hominy, a traditional hominy, not something out of a can, you use the white corn, and you have to boil it and process it with the wood ash, remove the husks, and then finally, it's about a 3-day process to make hominy and do the nokwavi, which is a mutton and hominy dish that is very popular at Hopi.
And it's really tasty, I assume.
It's tastiest if you have a freshly butchered sheep as opposed to the mutton that you buy at the grocery store.
Yeah.
So I don't know.
Make it.
Yeah. And when we were down there in May for our annual big Easter party, I bought a sheep from one of my Navajo friends. We butchered it and everything, cut it up, hauled it to Hopi, and I have to say that was the best nokwavi I have ever had.
Nokwavi.
Nokwavi. Yeah.
Man, I got to try that. That sounds great.
Yeah, well, yeah.
Maybe one day I could come down.
You'll have to come down and help butcher the sheep if you want the really good nokwavi.
I have fresh butchered goat every time I go to Bosnia. They roast goat over spits and coals, and it's great.
Yeah.
It's really awesome.
Yeah.
But, if there's no more questions, then we will wrap it up. Coming up next on the program, we've got Rocky Anderson. We're going to take a look at crime in Salt Lake City. I had a really interesting conversation with District Attorney Sim Gill in that he's telling me the crime has gone down all over the city of Salt Lake while it's gone up in other places. I want to have Sim Gill talk about that when he can come on the program, but in the meantime, I want to look at the crime stats with Rocky Anderson, and I want to go over what's happening with the homeless population and what his initiatives are if he is elected our next mayor again. So stay tuned. We're going to start a new stream on YouTube, and those of you with us on Instagram will be, I don't know how to point this my direction, but we'll be back in about 5 or 10 minutes. Thanks for watching.